Beatings, rubber bullets, tasings, sexual assault. This is some of the violence that members of the most recent Flotilla to Gaza say they suffered at the hands of Israeli forces.
Free Palestine!
Activists forced to kneel, their hands tied, as the Israeli national anthem plays. Israeli Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir released footage on X Wednesday of him taunting detained activists from a Gaza-bound flotilla.
Activists with the global Sumud and Freedom Flotilla were captured by Israel on May 18th and held for 3 days before being released. Last Saturday, I was at Trudeau Airport when 2 of the 3 Montrealers in the flotilla finally returned home.
Ribs broken, rubber bullets, wounds, knife wounds, all of that just happening because we dared say that the genocide on Gaza is not acceptable.
Hablo Tayef, a McGill IT worker, activist, and poet, and a former board member where I work, CKUT, says he had his hand sliced open by a guard while helping hand out water to other prisoners. Canada has called this treatment appalling and grave, egregious abuse, and says those responsible must be held accountable. Those responsible. That's who exactly? Prison guards? Itamar Ben-Gvir, who mocked flotilla members on video? Or Israel itself? What's Canada prepared to do to actually see that accountability through?
I guess I was wondering, why the outrage from the federal government now? This is not the first time Canadian activists have been beaten and illegally detained. It's not the first time they've been snatched from international waters. Why is the government suddenly so offended?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because we saw the tweet from Mark Carney. We saw Anita Anand also give a condemnation. I mean, both of those people went to basically their Israeli counterparts at this international conference this week and said, this isn't okay. This is unacceptable. And they
Didn't
haven't
Canada
really
write a strongly worded letter with New Zealand? Mm-hmm. Don't forget the ultimate alliance of Canada and New Zealand.
Yeah, but you're right. They haven't really done it in the past. There was a flotilla last fall, right? That September, October. And we heard a lot about Greta Thunberg. But there were Canadians who were part of that flotilla. Nima Mashouf, a doctor here in Quebec, very well known, very well respected. She was part of that flotilla effort. We didn't see the same response from the Canadian government then. And there were similar stories that came out. I think what has shifted at this time is Ben-Gvir's video, right?
Yeah.
And it's not even that there's anything really that extraordinary that's on tape there. You see people, their heads on the floor, their hands tied behind their hands. People are being forced down 1 or 2 times by guards. But it's this attitude, I think, that it is this gloating attitude of, we're the landlords. I mean, that's a really interesting statement to start with, first of all. But yeah, the difference is not so much in the treatment, but I mean, Canada
it's in the marketing.
It's in the marketing. Yeah, because it's like you don't want to appear weak that this other country, we all hear the stories, right? But you don't want to be too egregious with it. Then all the countries who are sending nationals, then they look really bad, right? At the same time, we've heard statements, but the flotilla activists, they say they want much more than statements. I was at YUL on Saturday, and Ehab was saying, a condemnation is just, we're well past the point where that's enough at this point.
Yeah. I gotta say, it was weird. It's weird, you see horrible things coming out of Gaza, coming out of Israel, and you but then you see, I've met Ehab before. I've seen him at protests. I've spoken to him. He's a very nice person. He's a very gentle person. I spoke to some people who knew him when I was trying to find out how he was doing. And they describe this gentle, kind, soft-spoken man. And it's this thing of I know this guy in real life. And I'm seeing a video of him being released from prison in Israel. And it really hits home in a way that it's stupid. Because I know that this is happening. But my heart feels differently when I see someone that I know. And it seems so much more real. And I just wonder how much of this is the politicians finally realizing that there are a lot of Canadians here with a connection to what's happening over there. There are people here, who have suffered during the trip, but I don't know. I don't know what it is that's caught. The video, I think, is the entire thing, right? It's marketing, right? It's I remember President Obama after they killed bin Laden was like, people were asking like, why don't you show the body? Why don't you like, and he said something like, well, in America, we don't spike the football. And it was very much like, it's not about killing people on foreign land, like in a secret, borderline illegal mission. It's the marketing of the mission. It's like, don't gloat. Like, you can do all this stuff. You can hold them in stress positions. You can treat them like garbage. Don't film yourself doing it.
Well, yeah, I mean, when there has been a crisis in American foreign relations, the way that their soldiers treat people, the torture that's happened overseas, it's when footage has come out, right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing about Gaza is that we saw like iPhone footage, but journalists have been so systematically killed and people have been denied access to the Gaza Strip. Like, you talk about foreign journalists, that's been the story of the war, but more recently, it's NGOs. It's 37 NGOs, MSF, Médecins Sans Frontières, like they are not operating. They're not sending foreign people into Gaza, I should say. They have Gazan teams made of Palestinian nationals. But it's just, the goal of the flotilla is like all eyes on Gaza.
Yeah.
But what makes it hard to be, I don't know if believed is the right word. I don't know that it's a question of belief, but just to have what's happening be actionable is, at this point, just the lack of eyes on it.
Yeah.
That's the point of the flotilla, right? There's a kind of twofold mission, what they're trying to do.
And people often criticize the flotilla. Like, critics of the flotilla will say, well, they don't really want to bring aid. They're not really trying, they know the aid's not going to make it there, so that it's just a performance. It's just theater. How would you counter that?
Yeah, I mean, Israel calls it a PR stunt, right? And it's true, there is a symbolic amount of aid on these boats. There is humanitarian aid, but it's not enough to really make a dent. As a drop in the bucket, right? But I think it's interesting, this idea that like a performance is somehow less real, right? Less actionable. Because, yeah, seeing these videos of Ehab, like before he came to Canada, back when he was in Turkey, he was like first deported. This is somebody that I've met going to protests, covering, the press conference for when the flotilla came. This is someone I've spoken to over the years. And you just see someone you don't know well, but look 10 years older, look so just depleted. And whether or not it's a performance that is having some truth to it, which is just the conditions that these people are going through. What the flotilla participants are alleging is like in line with what we hear from the UN.
Yeah.
Report after report, the special rapporteur on torture. It's just like reams of documentation.
The New York Times, which never ever criticize Israel. They released this scathing report into the systematic rape of Palestinian prisoners inside those prisons, and you wonder if this is how they treat white, well-meaning people from the West when they come and try, how are they treating Palestinians in those jails? I mean, I think for a lot of people, you keep wondering okay, what is going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back? And I don't think that's going to happen politically yet. People on the ground, the polling is overwhelmingly in favor of Canadians recognize this as a genocide. Canadians have gone from having favorable views of Israel to having overwhelmingly negative views about Israel. But our political class, it seems, at the highest level anyways, are just incapable. All of this summoning of Israeli officials, what has it actually accomplished? They did it when there was a Canadian aid worker who was killed by a missile strike during an aid operation. And again, they summoned the Israeli ambassador and they wrote a strongly worded letter, but what does that amount to in the end?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because it's that's diplomacy for you.
Yeah.
That's diplomacy, is having a meeting with somebody you hate and saying, I wish you wouldn't do that. And they're well, I wish you wouldn't do this. I wish you wouldn't send these Hamas supporters that are your citizens, right? And yeah, obviously activists want more. They say we're past the point where an arms embargo on Israel is enough because there's weapons getting through. From General Dynamics' plant in Valleyfield, Quebec, there's reporting that shows that through the United States, these ballistics parts are ending up in Israel. You can see that on the U.S. Department of Defense procurement website, right?
The 155 millimeter shells that they use in their tanks and some of their artillery weapons. The fuel for those shells is produced at the General Dynamics factory, and there's going to be like a $600 million expansion to that factory entirely funded by the U.S. Army. And again, like, well, why even have a border at this point? Are we just like, we're just junior partners in the genocide? Or
But what people are calling for is an economic boycott, like a more of a political boycott, something that's going beyond arms and saying we are imposing more significant sanctions. And yeah, I just don't think right now there's an appetite for that, at least in the Canadian government.
Yeah.
I would say in the Canadian public, it seems like yes, right? But I mean, if you want to talk about Carney, like he's wanting to shake hands and make deals. At the same time, he's been harsher towards Israel than Trudeau has.
Absolutely.
So it's interesting. I think he doesn't want to look like a fool, but he wants to be wise. I don't know. I don't cover national or international, so I don't really know. But bringing it back to Quebec, it's interesting because here we have a kind of history politically of like pretty strong pro-Palestinian mobilization, I would say, in the province. And yet at the same time, we have a government that's opened an economic office in Tel Aviv during the conflict. We have the Caisse de Dépôt Placement du Québec, our pension fund here in Quebec that is investing
massively in companies that either are directly involved in the armaments or they're providing technology, or it's insane. And
to their credit, the federal government somewhat recently put out the statement that was saying, like, if you are a company that is operating in these legal settlements, like you could be in violation of international law. So this is something that activists have been calling for. There are small steps being taken.
Yeah, and the recognition of the state, like it's not nothing. It is like, for a country as conservative in their dealings with the international community as Canada is, it is something.
But practically on the ground, like Ihab was saying that when he and the other prisoners were first released, like there were some lawyers from the Israeli NGO Adala who were there to greet them, like these hundreds of prisoners. But, Canadian consular officials were not there.
Yeah.
And so this is something Anita Anand has said, was that Israel was in violation of the Vienna Convention, which I just learned existed. There's many Vienna Conventions on consular services. Yeah, who knew? But it's basically this rule that says, like, hey, if you have a national that's being detained, imprisoned, what have you, your consular officials should be able to talk to them, should be able to visit them. She's saying that was not respected, which, like, we knew that. But what Ehab was saying is, like, okay, if this is such a big deal, if Canada cares so much about this, where were they the minute when we were being released? They were there in Turkey to interview us about what we went through. But where were they on the ground, like, when we really needed it most? So there's a way in which Canada is saying, like, Israel is stopping us from providing for our citizens in the way that we need to. The treatment is egregious. It's abominable. Carney said it was abominable. But it's like, I think people who are within the movement have expressed to me, like, they just don't believe this. They just don't think that that the
empty words.
It's empty words. Yeah. That's what they say.
I think, like, I was wondering, like, it's impossible to have a conversation about this, and especially Itamar Ben-Gvir, without mentioning this week in Montreal, there was a protest and they hanged Itamar Ben-Gvir in effigy, right? Like there was a printout of his face, and certain politicians, like the Liberal MP Anthony Housefather, I think even Soraya Martinez-Ferrada, the mayor, they describe this as they're hanging a Jewish person in public, and that's what this protest is. Like, it feels like they're intentionally misinterpreting the situation to make it far worse than it is. And their reaction to this symbolic hanging of a politician who wants, who passed the controversial "let's hang Palestinians but not our citizens" law, like, that guy, the hanging of that guy gets more of a reaction than our own brothers and sisters and family members who go over there, and, like, one of them literally has a stab wound in his hand, and they endured such horrible things, and there's people being murdered across the world. Like, we're angrier about that than the murder, and it feels like it's breaking my brain. What's
interesting, so it's Montreal for Palestine. This is the group that you're referring to, who They have videos on their social media of this as well. It's part of a protest. They're like a smaller group of pro-Palestine protesters in the city than, let's say, the Palestinian youth movement.
Yeah.
But they are one of the main players, and they do a lot of regular protests. And it is interesting whenever one of these things gets picked up by the media outrage cycle. Because, it's Ben Gvir, right? And he's wearing a kippah, and people are saying, like it's a Jew being hanged. But to the protesters' side, they're saying, well, we also were hanging an effigy of Donald Trump and an effigy of Netanyahu. These are people we consider war criminals. It makes me think of Jean Boulet when
the guillotine.
When they guillotined the papier-mâché Jean Boulet, Quebec's labor
They weren't
minister.
like, that's a Christian. Well, I know there's different reasons. We're not Christians are not a minority, and they're not the victim of hate crimes, and I think that's very, very important. Like, there's a difference.
But what's interesting about that protest is they're like very actively picking out, these are the three people who are responsible.
Yeah.
These are the people who have power in the situation. And it made me think about Canada's response because, when this happened, the Flotilla, I asked Global Affairs Canada for a statement. And you've seen this also in the statement of these politicians, right? They're saying, those responsible must be held accountable. But who's responsible? Yeah. Is it the specific prison guards on this prison ship, right? Are those the people who were allegedly routinely beating each prisoner as they were entering, sometimes assaulting sexually, sometimes tasing people, sometimes stabbing them, right? Are those the people who should be held accountable? Is it Ben Gvir? Is it leadership within these institutions? Is it Israel itself? So it's just interesting to me, like, I feel like we're not having the conversation where these politicians are being pushed. Like, who is actually responsible here? And that's what the Flotilla is trying to do. Like, it's a PR stunt, but the goal of the stunt, I think, is to make us ask those questions. Like, who's responsible for putting a complete naval blockade on Gaza since 2007? Who's responsible for, like, slowing aid flows to a halt at some point and then taking over, politicizing, if you believe the UN, the control of aid distribution in the Gaza Strip? Like, who's responsible? And, it's clear if you listen to the movement, they have an answer for that. But it's interesting that politicians are kind of getting away with doing the diplomacy thing of just, or the journalism thing, right? Of just saying, like, bombs were dropped, like people were tortured. Okay, well, like, who?
Yeah.
Who and by whom and why? Yeah. Anyway.